Welcome to Sustainable Leadership Live. I'm Lisa Danforth, your host, and today I have the fantastic Jodi Flynn. She is going to be talking all about, so you got that promotion, how to actually thrive within it and create even create bandwidth, which I just think is amazing, and I cannot wait to hear what you have to say, Jodi.
Lisa, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. I could talk about this stuff all day long.
I know we were talking a little over time in the green room because we were having such fun. So Jodi is the CEO and founder of Women Taking the Lead. She also has an award-winning podcast by the same name. She is an author. And I say, let's just jump right in, Jodi, and start sharing your brilliance. And where would you like to start?
Well, I would love to start. We were chatting about, you talk about that situation where women get promoted and then what happens afterwards. And some people embrace the promotion beautifully. They're amazing. They're flying high. But most of the people I talk to, and there's a reason for that, because I help these women in particular, they will reach out to me and say, I've been promoted and oh my God, I'm trying to get control of my life back again. It's been very wobbly. I had a couple of clients. It was amazing. Within a month, two different women said, I'm still trying to get my feet back under me, right? That feeling of getting your sea legs back and, feeling more confident and in control. And, but like I said, some people take to it, but what I find is that there's typically a couple of things that are going on that cause women to feel that way after a promotion, where they feel like their confidence has taken a hit, they even may be questioning their competence. Am I the right person?
And they're probably taking a ton on and just
Yes. And just feeling overwhelmed in all the things. And and it's no joke. There are some women who, when we start working together, they're just exhausted and overwhelmed. And their company is like, hey, when are you going to be ready for the next promotion? Because we think you're great, you're lovely, right? And they're like, I don't know if I want that anymore. I thought I was very ambitious and a high flyer, but now I'm questioning, is this for me? Am I cut out for this? And so what I find is it's yes, absolutely. They're cut out for it. They can go further, but they just have to shift a couple of things before they'll be ready to move on. And let's talk about the condition that they're in. They're usually attending all the meetings. They might even still be doing some of the work they did in their last role. They haven't quite handed it over yet to the person who was promoted in their stead or was hired in their stead. And, it's just the amount of tasks and things that they're doing is just incredible. And so when we start talking about this and we get into it, one thing that is going on is they haven't shifted their identity to being a leader at that level, right?
Mindset.
All
so
mindset.
Huge, right? We've got to start setting other things down so we can focus.
Absolutely. And this typically, not always, it can happen anytime, but I find it's very prevalent when the promotion may have been a little unexpected, right? We wanted it. We were like, when the day comes, I want that promotion, but maybe the timeline moved up a little quicker. Somebody moved on, somebody else got promoted, a position was created, and it almost feels like overnight you're in that position and now you're doing the job. And they haven't yet taken on the mindset of, I am this leader, whatever that means for them, And when we haven't taken on the mindset that yep, this was for me, this is perfect, this is in alignment, other questions will start coming up. Did they pick the right person? Maybe they made a mistake. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. So
self-doubt.
Yeah, the self-doubt. So at that point, they need to be asking themselves, who am I in this role? What kind of leader do I want to be? How do I want to be showing up?
I think that what you just said is so key. What kind of leader do I want to be, and gaining clarity on that so that you can understand what are the priorities in order to be that leader.
Yes. And I think sometimes, we have to visualize in our own head what it looks like before we are ready to step into it, right? Because if we're just showing up, and when I mean showing up, I mean just logging in, like going to work. We're kind of on autopilot. And so we're responding based on whatever's coming at us, right? If we're getting a lot of appreciation and positivity, then it's easier to just be great. But if we're faced with challenges and adversity and that sort of thing, we're kind of reacting to that. But when you go into the day and into the role, thinking about what kind of leader do I want to be, you can anchor in that
Mhm.
and you can come back to that.
Clarity, I find, it's so very important. How do we make the decisions, whether it's for leadership, whether it's for a team, the direction of the business, when we don't have that clarity, that longer term goal, that all of our shorter term choices and even mindset is in context too.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're not 100% clear on what kind of leader you want to be, then you're going to be a little bit different day
Mhm.
to day. You'll be inconsistent. And I think that's sometimes why we question, like, am I the right person for this? Did they pick the right person? So identity is a big one, right? You have to, and I have so many stories about this in my own experience where you really have to own and embrace,
Mhm.
like, I am the person to do this job. I can do this job. Because if you're questioning and you're not sure, there'll be conflict every day internally, which will then manifest itself in external conflict. Everything that comes at you will feel harder because you're in doubt that you're even the one who can do this.
Right, and that gets in the way of you being the person, right? So what we're trying to avoid, we're actually creating those identity-based goals, those identity-based habits as a person who, I am a leader who, we absolutely live into those. We were talking about that in the
Yes.
green room beforehand, but before we went live, of understanding who we need to be, but that mindset component is so imperative.
Yeah, and I would even say I love what came to mind as you said that is like take out a piece of paper and write down all those things. I am a leader who listens. I am a leader who is organized. I am a leader who is prepared. I am a leader who is flexible, right? What and it could be different for everybody else. I would say don't get rid of listening. Like that's hugely important, but there might be some other things also that would make your list more than others.
And I'd love your input on this. I know with my clients, they have a hard time focusing on the positive. I'm bad at this, or I don't even know what I want, but I know I don't want this. That if I'm horrible at, to write that down. But if that is what it is, then what is the flip side? Like I have
Yeah.
one client who identifies as kind of an anxious leader because is I don't want to say slow to process, but he's very thoughtful. And
Mhm.
when we shifted it from I'm an anxious leader, so he was showing up as that, to I'm actually a thoughtful leader where I take things in and process, his entire identity completely changed just by that the way that he was
Right.
leading change because of the identification shift.
What we label things is important, right? And it will determine our experience. So, am I anxious or am I thoughtful?
Mhm.
Am I careful? Right? That sort of thing. Is it really anxiety? I don't know. I mean, it could be one of the, but what you get to decide. I did a presentation last week and I was talking to some of the women who were at the table I was sitting at and they were all like, you're going to be great. They were wonderful. You're going to be great. And I was a little nervous, and I was honest about it. I was like, thank you so much because I'm feeling a little nervous. And, what we were talking about, and they shared how they feel nervous when they have to present.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, you know why we feel nervous? It's because we care. We
Yes, it's
want to do
important.
a good job and we want to deliver, a great experience for the people who are listening. So that's just energy, right? I
Mhm.
can label it nervousness. And in the moment I did, because it was like, I want to be vulnerable and share with them. The experience I'm having. But then I instantly flipped it. Like I care, I'm excited, I'm amped up and I'm ready to go.
And that's a habit. Would you agree?
Oh, yes.
To pause and say, okay, I'm nervous, but you know what? Actually, it's just that I'm important. So that building that habit is what allows us to shift that perspective and be the leader that we want to be. And like we were talking about at the beginning, creating more bandwidth for ourselves because we've got the brain power to make the space for it.
Yes, and the habit here can be, just as a tip, what's another way to look at this, right? If we're having an experience that we're not loving, right? Like, I
That's a
don't want
good
to
way of
label
putting
it good or bad, but let's just say we're not particularly loving the experience in the moment. What's another way I can look at this? What is the silver lining? What is the
Mhm.
benefit that can come from this? Like, are all questions you can ask yourself to kind of shift the experience. Because sometimes we hate to admit how much control we have over our experience, right? Because then we have to take responsibility for it. And I get it. I totally get it. Like, if I'm responsible for my experience, then when I'm not having a great experience, I also have to say, like, part of what I'm doing here is contributing to this experience. Not that the circumstances have changed, but how I'm experiencing these circumstances is up to me. But when we know we have that power, whenever we're having an experience that is not great, we can shift it, even if it's just a little bit, right? And we can look at, like, I don't love that this is happening, but this is happening. And how do I want to show up in this experience? What do I want to take away from this experience? And then you completely have power in that experience.
And it might be 2 steps forward, 1 step back for a while, or even 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. So I love everything that you said, and expect that as you're building the muscle, you're not going to have it perfect. It's going to be kind of messy as
Right.
we're stepping into it, especially that mindset component. So we've talked about mindset. We've talked a little bit about the habits.
Mm-hmm.
How do we step into this new position? We've got new responsibilities and actually thrive and create bandwidth. Can you share some tips on that?
You set me up perfectly to talk about the second thing that typically trips women up after a promotion. And that is, they don't shift their relationship around how they provide value, right?
Can you
And
repeat that, please? Just
we,
to drive that one home.
yeah, they don't shift their mindset around how they provide value. And so to kind of expand on this, when we're individual contributors, right? We're usually early in our career, we're doing all the things, right? We're moving a lot of widgets, we got a lot of busy work, and that's great. We talked about building the muscle, right? This work helps, young people coming into an industry, or even somebody, who's older coming newly into an industry or career, it builds experience, helps build knowledge, all of those things. So it's really great. But as we rise through the ranks of leadership, we have to let go of that busy work. And even around middle management, when you're rising into the senior levels or executive levels, you even have to, like, give up being the one who fixes the problems, right? And a lot of women who are high performers, high achievers, and who have ambition have gotten where they've gotten to because they're fantastic at solving the problems and fixing things and, saving the day. A lot of us love to save the day, right? We're jumping in, we're taking care of things, we're getting it done, and it feels great. But at the senior level, and depending on what company you're in, this could even be like mid-level management, because it all depends on the size of company. But you'll know, like, whoever, the person who's listening to this, you'll know as we're saying this, if you still feel the need to be in all the meetings and to be diving into the challenges, it's going to eat up all your time. And at those levels, at the higher levels, you need to be taking more steps back and being more strategic and being the
Doing
person
less.
coaching and doing less, right? And so the mindset shift that I give my clients on this one is, other than the time management things of, like, you don't have to be doing all of this, not at your level. It's not required, but there's a mindset shift that if they don't take it on, it will make it really hard to execute any of these strategies. And that is, instead of being the person who solves all the problems, saves the day, and fixes things, and is the doer, you are now developing future leaders. And so your job is to give the people around you opportunities to grow, learn, thrive, and experience leadership as well. So you are delegating, not because you don't want the work, you're delegating to give other people opportunity, and you're coaching. You're doing a lot more coaching, mentoring, being a resource, and that strategy work. I have a client who, when we first started working together, that was her condition: attending all the meetings, doing all the work, email on every email that was
Ooh.
coming anywhere near her role or responsibility,
Mhm.
reading them, and she was at the point where she was like, I know, like, my leaders want me to take a promotion that's coming up in the next 3 to 5 years. And she's like, I'm telling you right now, I haven't told them, I don't want it. I don't
Can I
want
ask you, was
it.
she a mid-level management? Because what I find is the mid-level management are the ones that kind of left to the wolves. The higher up you go, you might have an executive coach, you have a little bit more support, but it's that first level that I found they don't have all of the knowledge that they need to support themselves in taking a few things off from their plate.
She was newly at the executive level. So that's part of the reason why I came into the picture. But these were all habits that came from mid-level management, right? So, and this is the thing, a lot of mid-level managers, they do, it's like baptism by fire. They learn how to build more bandwidth, right? They're super busy, but they may feel like, I've got it under control, until life throws them a curveball. Right? As long as life is not throwing them any curveballs and there's no surprises, they've got it all under control. I'm laughing because how many times I'm like, my calendar, I'm good. I'm good, until, like, oops, something happened and somebody needs something. And then I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do? Because
The
there's
bleep hits the fan.
right. There's no room on my calendar for surprises and that sort of thing. So, but once you're in that, like, senior level, like, you cannot, it doesn't matter how much bandwidth you have, you will not be able to fulfill your role if you are too in the weeds of the day-to-day work. You have to trust your team, right? And you do that by developing them.
Exactly. So one thing I want to back up, you had said that, especially as women, how do we provide value? And that can really get in our way. But you were talking about the doing. To me, how we provide value is often in the being. We have that doing down, but it's who are we being that actually starts shifting and having us stepping into that leadership, but also confidently learning how to delegate. We're not really taught how to delegate and being able to start taking things off. Where do you recommend people start? Is there a book? Is there a resource? I mean, I know you've got a great opt-in on your page, which we can share at the end, but where can people start to learn how to start? They don't have to add everything to their plate and continue adding without taking off. There's some tools.
I actually think women are great at delegating because they raise children. Right. So they know, and no disrespect, it's the same process, right? It's the same thing as, like, a 3-year-old who goes, no, let me do. Right. And you want to just zip their coat and tie their shoes and get out the door. But they're like, no, let me do. And your children teach you, like, hey, back off. Give me some space. Let me struggle with this. Right. And I think that's the heart. What women don't struggle with delegating. They struggle with letting other people struggle a little bit and making mistakes. Go ahead, Lisa, you've got a thought.
Well, yeah, sorry. I know I hide things really well, don't I? It reminds me of the blog the article, no, actually it was a post on LinkedIn about your most recent podcast, which everyone's listening, listen to this podcast. It's about boundaries, right? If the child or if the employee, whatever is is setting boundaries, we get to set boundaries as well. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the boundary component, because that in the green room, we were really talking about that. It's essential.
Yes.
In creating bandwidth and delegating.
100%. And I'll close the loop on delegating. I will say this: just because you delegate something doesn't mean you abdicate any responsibility for it. Like, still have check-ins, still, especially when they're first learning a new task or assignment, or they're taking over a project, check in and see how things going. And, like, understand the thought process of your team member, right? Because that is a big indicator of how they'll handle things that come up if you're not available. What is their normal thought process that goes into solving problems, working with other people, that sort of thing? So, you can keep a little bit of a connection to what you've delegated for a little while. You have to trust as well. So
Mhm.
that is important. And around boundaries, let's go back to the question of, what kind of leader do I want to be? I think
Mhm.
that you also need to ask yourself, what do you think? And I asked this in the podcast to have everyone ask themselves, what do you think about a leader who sets boundaries? What do you think about a leader who
Okay.
says no, thank you? Right? Because what we think of those leaders will determine how we will behave, right? And you talked about power of deductions and starting with the negative. Early in our career, we think about who we want to be as a leader. What shapes us is
Mhm.
typically the boss we had that we did not like or who did not make us feel great. And we think of that boss and the things that they did that made us feel bad or unsupported or
Mhm.
whatever. And we go, I'm not going to do that
Right.
when I'm a leader. So we're already starting by powers of like deduction, right?
Action.
We have leaders who we aspire to, but sometimes we think like, oh, they've got these magical powers and someday I'll be like them. We're not really thinking about they were really present. They were
Mhm.
really wonderful. They're great at showing appreciation. So we may little by little add those things in, but it's the experience that burnt us or really had an emotional resonance with us that will shape who we are as leaders going forward. So if there were leaders in the past who set boundaries and said no and you didn't like it, I would explore that. Like, because it's not black or white. It's not
No.
that there are some times where you do want to say yes. And there are situations where, okay, the boundary doesn't make sense. Like there's an emergency. Okay,
Mhm.
boundaries go out the door. Like somebody's bleeding, somebody needs to go to the hospital. This boundary, bye-bye. And we're gonna now reform boundaries in this moment. And life situations will cause us to reform boundaries. But you want to know what those things are. And anything that doesn't constitute an emergency, then the boundary holds.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot. Boundaries are important, but we really have to think about our boundaries. We can't be flippant about them. We can't just think that because we told somebody this is my boundary that they're going to respect it. Like, and this was the point in the podcast as well. Like it's only a true boundary if it's enforced.
Your boundaries are about you. They're not about other people. It's not
Mhm.
their responsibility to hold a boundary. And I think that's where we often get tripped up is that our boundary is there to protect us. Our boundary is about us. The other people are not responsible for it. And I think that's where we can really get tripped up. And to go back to what you were saying with the boss that was hard or that you didn't like, was it actually the boundary or was it the way that it was delivered that
Mhm.
was the real issue, that the trigger for us?
Yes, 100%. And I'll add to that as well. You were saying how other people are not responsible for our boundaries. Also, what I notice can happen is if our boundary isn't respected once or twice or three times, and it can be three different people, sometimes we quickly conclude, I can't have this boundary. This
Oh,
boundary doesn't work. Don't give up. Don't
thank you. Not
don't give
give
up. You
up.
may have to reinforce this 3 times with the same
Mhm.
person and 20 times with a handful of people, but don't give up. Like, remember why you set this boundary, why it was
Perfect.
important, and why you needed this. And, like, it's a like, we're gonna come back to this over and over again. It's a muscle. It's a
Mhm.
muscle, and you just have to keep building those reps. And eventually, you teach the people around you that when I say something, I'm serious.
Mhm.
Because and you know this because I stay true to this, and my behavior and everything I do backs it up.
That is key. And one tip that I always give people as well, you don't have to explain. When we go into the explanation of it, it minimizes it. Then we can also backtrack and then we'll just be like, oh, screw it. I'll just do it or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
Establish the boundary, be clear, respectful and direct, that's our responsibility. It is not our responsibility how it lands for the other person. So as a leader, who do you want to be? What are the boundaries that are going to support you?
Yes,
And
not everything requires an explanation. And I often will compose an email and then I'll go back and edit it. And I will often take all the explanation out. It's superfluous. It's not needed. I'll just give a quick example.
Perfect.
I need to reschedule a meeting. There's a conflict. And I'm asking the person I'm meeting with, could we reschedule? They can come back and say no, it's fine. But I don't have to say, oh, this happened and then this happened and now I'm up against a wall. And if you don't mind, da, 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 da. Like they don't need all of that. All they need to know is something has come up. You need to reschedule. Are they open to that? And they can say, you know what? If we don't meet at this time, I'm not available until the summer of 2023. Okay, now the ball's back in your court and you can decide, right?
Right.
Like
Priorities.
Right. You can decide, okay, like what can I make happen? You know, it's a negotiation. But sometimes I think we just feel so bad about making requests or asking for what we need or holding boundaries that we feel like we need to have this like real big explanation. Some people may need to understand like why they're attempting to, cross your boundary is like impacting you. But yes, we don't always have to give these long explanations.
And this goes back to the mindset. This goes back to the habits of supporting us and being the leader that we want to be so that we can create the bandwidth and prepare ourselves for the next promotion, for building our teams, for actually creating a thriving life. I think that's so very important. Yeah. Believe it or not, we are at time. I think you and I could talk for another hour easily.
Easily.
Is there anything that you want to share before we sort of wrap things up? Because I know again, we could talk for so long, but is there a point that you really want to stay or a resource of some sort?
I think two things, Lisa, we had talked about before we hit record of how like a lot of this can feel overwhelming and like there's a lot to do and so many things. But what I would suggest is start very small. What is one simple thing you can do that will help you to adjust post-promotion to make you feel a little more in control? And I would say start with where you are right now and what's in front of you. Like, what can you do that will just move the needle a little bit further and then expand from there as you are allowed, right? Or as time presents itself. And I would love for anyone who's been listening to connect with me here on LinkedIn. And if you're interested, I have a leadership operating system inventory where you can do a quick self-assessment on how you are at different leadership skills so that you know where to focus your time and energy and where you're doing really great and you can leverage. And if you just go to womentakingthelead.com, it's right on the homepage and there'll even be a pop-up that will come up.
I love those easy things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely take that assessment. It's going to help you. Complimentary, very, very quick. You'll get so many insights from that one assessment.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. And can you repeat your website one more time for anyone who wants to reach out, check you out?
Yeah. It's Women Taking the Lead, and women is plural, so with an E.
Perfect.
.com.
This has been wonderful. So I would love to ask before we wrap up, what is one habit or boundary that has supported you in living and leading a more sustainable life?
Well, in terms of sustainability, when I hear that word, I think about my energy, right? My focus throughout the day. So a habit that I have is to take 2 minutes to just do a body scan, like a few times throughout the day to just, what sensations am I having? What temperatures am I feeling? What sounds am I hearing? That sort of thing. And that just like, just brings me back. And then I feel so much better. Our restorative time is just as important as our active time.
Yeah, it's so true. We think we can keep going, but there's that law of diminishing return. And I love that habit. I think I might try to instill that a little bit more in my life.
Yay.
Jodi, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your brilliance. Have a fantastic holiday.
Yes. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you again for inviting me on, and for everyone listening. Happy holidays. And I hope this was of value to you.
And please remember to reach out to Jodi. Happy holidays, everyone. Take care.